If you've ever tried to rest by binge watching something while secretly feeling guilty the whole time, yeah, same. Today we're talking about why biblical rest might be something very different from just relaxing. What's up, my EFF? Let me tell you how it is. You've stumbled upon Jots, a series about the nature of love, compassion, joy, and the real-life connection between human beings. I'm Ender Bowen, Nashville, Tennessee rock pop artist, author, husband, father, complete dork, and aspiring compassionist. Sit back, relax, and be prepared to laugh, cry, maybe even learn some new things about basic grammar for some reason. Why biblical rest isn't just relaxation. The world often treats rest like a reward, something you earn after grinding all week, a weekend luxury you can maybe afford if your to-do list finally waves a white flag. We equate productivity with worth, so when we sit still, we feel guilty, lazy, behind. And believe me, I'm guilty of that guilt. If I'm not busy, I start spiraling. I'll grab a remote, binge some pro wrestling, and pretend that counts as rest, though that's a different shame entirely. My brain insists that unless I'm hustling, I'm losing, which makes actual rest stressful. But rest isn't the absence of productivity, it's part of God's design for it. The Bible doesn't frame rest as a nap or a Netflix coma. It presents rest as a rhythm, and you know I like rhythm, a cadence written into creation itself. Genesis tells us that after 6 days of creating heavens, seas, zebras, and yes, us, God rested on the seventh. Did God collapse into a hammock out of exhaustion? No, he's God. The biblical meaning of rest isn't collapse, it's completeness. It's punctuation that gives the sentence of creation its meaning. And that's where it gets really interesting. Even Jesus, who could heal crowds and multiply carbs, bread for everyone, carved out time to rest. He withdrew to lonely places to pray. He napped in a boat during a storm while everyone else panicked. Rest wasn't weakness. It was part of his mission. That tells me something. If rest was important enough for Jesus, it's probably important enough for me too. The biblical principle of rest versus our culture of hustle. In our modern hustle culture, we idolize busyness. Rest feels like cheating on ambition. If you're not hustling, you're rusting. That's the story we tell ourselves, right? Rise and grind, we say, as if exhaustion were a badge of honor instead of a warning sign. But the biblical principle of rest flips that script. Rest isn't wasted time. It's the necessary pause that gives shape to the work. Think about it. A song without rests? Chaos. A speech without pauses? A breathless rant. A life without Sabbath? Exhaustion disguised as achievement. A 15-mile run without stopping to throw up halfway through? No, that's showing off. Mostly. The Bible doesn't present rest as a lazy recliner moment. It presents it as a sacred rhythm. That's why the Sabbath exists. Not because God needed a nap, but because humans needed to be reminded that worth isn't measured by output. The biblical benefits of rest aren't just physical, they're deeply, deeply spiritual. Rest resets perspective. It creates the spaces between where we can breathe, listen, and remember why we're doing any of this in the first place. Without rest, we mistake motion for meaning. Hebrews 4 describes God's rest as a promise, something we enter into. It's not about vacations, naps, or the absence of stress. It's about presence. It's about aligning our lives with God's rhythm so we don't collapse into meaninglessness. And yet, here we are, checking email at midnight, turning quiet time into another checklist. I think I do that. Shaming ourselves if we take an afternoon nap. For the record, naps are holy. Fight me. Rest isn't a luxury. It's the pattern of creation. And when we ignore it, we aren't more productive. We're just more tired. I am so excited to tell you about my very first Jots book, Forgiveness and Healing, How to Seek, Offer, and Understand the Power of Forgiveness. What is forgiveness? What is the power of forgiveness? And how can you use it to set yourself free from the chains of that bondage? Learn how to forgive, learn how to apologize, and read real stories
from real people that'll help you get through it. Plus, hey, on top of that, a whole lot of my weirdness, I suppose. So if you're willing to take a chance on that, check it out. It's available now, including signed copies, at forgivenessbook.godjots.com. Go check it out.
Rest as a comma in God's story, not the end. Here's a metaphor that's quickly growing into a favorite of mine. Life is full of commas. Rest is a comma, not a period. Period. Without commas, language is suffocating. Without rests, music is noise. Without pauses, we miss the beauty in between. Even death, the punctuation we fear most, isn't a period in God's story. Jesus showed us that. The cross looked like an ending, but the resurrection revealed it as a comma, a pause before redemption's next phrase. That's the biblical definition of rest in its fullest sense. Not idleness, not nothingness, a pause that anticipates continuation. Think about it this way. When you're in a season of waiting, a job transition, a breakup, the silence after grief, you feel like nothing's happening. You're stalled, you're behind. But what if that's not the end of the sentence? What if you're just in comma territory? God is still writing. Even in death, we're not erased, we're paused, which is both terrifying and comforting. Kind of like listening to someone tell a story and they stop mid-sentence for dramatic effect. That silence is not nothing, it's expectancy. So when life slows, or when it feels like you've been benched, don't assume it's a period. God doesn't do cliffhangers without resolutions. You're in a comma moment. Embracing biblical rest as life's commas. The world says, rest when you've earned it. The Bible says, rest because you're human. That's why Sabbath exists. That's why God modeled it. Not because he needed recovery, but because we needed recalibration. Our hearts are too quick to confuse identity with productivity. Rest resets that confusion. So here's the challenge. Embrace the commas. When life slows, don't resent the pause. When rest feels forced, don't see it as punishment. When death looms, don't assume it's the period. Rest is where God recalibrates us. It's where he whispers what can't be heard over the grind. It's the comma that turns frantic sentences into living poetry. This means rest isn't wasted. It's holy. It's resistance against a culture that demands you burn out for worth. It's trust that God is God and you are not. It's permission to be unfinished. And is that ever something I need to hear? So the next time you're stuck in rest mode, remember, you're not falling behind, you're being readied. You're still in motion, just in a different, necessary way. And when your story's comma stretches into eternity, remember that it's not the end. It's the pause before a resurrection you can't yet imagine. All right, now it's your turn. What do you think of this new way of looking at the concept of rest? If you're like me and that you often feel guilty or ashamed of taking a break or not being productive, is this something that might help you get the rest and relaxation you need and deserve? How might you use this period of rest to reflect on what has been done and prepare for what comes next? What are some ways you can embrace the comma in the story of your life? If you like this episode and want to be notified when new ones are uploaded, make sure you don't leave without hitting that subscribe button. Or subscribe to God Jots on your favorite podcast streaming service. You can also check out more God Jots, as well as subscribe to the Monday Joy Bomb newsletter for ebooks, updates, and exclusive content at godjots.com. Until next time, be honest with yourself. Be truthful with others. Give people the opportunity to surprise you. And remember that it's impossible to have absolutely nothing in common with another human being. Be a little light in the world. I'm sure I'll see you soon.